My phone buzzed during a board meeting with a notification from the kindergarten parents group. The teacher had tagged me. "Mrs. Daniels, your daughter is expelled. Pick her up now." I typed, "Why?" Leo's mom replied arrogantly. "Your daughter didn't call my son young master. Isn't that reason enough? My husband is Liam Gomez, brother of the richest man, Miles Gomez. Got a problem?" Before I could respond, the teacher apologized to her and promised to award Leo in class the following day. The chat flooded with fawning praise. Someone posted a photo of my bruised, tearful daughter, tagging me with the caption, "Being beaten by the wealthiest man's nephew is a blessing, don't be ungrateful." My blood ran cold for two reasons simultaneously. The first was the photo of my daughter's face. The second was the name. Liam Gomez, my brother, who had been dead for 10 years. I ended the meeting without explanation, messaged my legal team to find out who was impersonating my dead brother, and to bring a team to the kindergarten, and drove there in the 10-year-old domestic vehicle I used for school runs, a custom-built rare model that looked unremarkable to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at, which was most people, which had never bothered me until today. When I pulled up to the school gate, I saw Leo's mother immediately, holding court in the center of a ring of parents who were competing to flatter her. The teacher was there, bowing and scraping, offering to adjust the entire kindergarten menu to Leo's preferences, and to hold him up as a model student for his bravery in expressing his emotions, by which she meant his willingness to hit a smaller child. The other parents were telling each other that any child who made the young master resort to violence must be trash by definition. One father told the group he had already instructed his son to be Leo's loyal follower and protector. I stood at the edge of this performance and thought about my brother, who had been the most genuinely humble person I had ever known, who had worked beside me for years building the Gomez Group into what it was, who had been kind to everyone regardless of what they could offer him, who had died too young and asked for a quiet funeral, and whose name was now being used as social currency by a woman I had never met to justify having my daughter thrown out of school for failing to address a 5-year-old boy as young master. When the parents saw me approaching, their expressions shifted in unison from performance to contempt, the particular contempt of people who have identified someone as beneath them and feel licensed by that identification. The teacher marched up and told me the director had ordered my daughter's expulsion and I should teach her to know her place. I told her my daughter had been assaulted in her school and that expelling the victim to curry favor with the powerful was something I intended to address through every available channel. The teacher said this was an elite kindergarten that prioritized student status and the Gomez family was not someone a lowlife like me could afford to offend. My expression hardened. I told her she should do her research and find out exactly who I was. Before I could say anything further, Leo's mother stepped forward and slapped me hard across the face. The other parents erupted. They told me that being beaten by Miles Gomez's nephew was an honor for trash like me, that I didn't know what the Gomez name meant, that I was worse than garbage. Someone literally spat in my direction. I took off my jacket, a custom piece worth more than most of their cars, and dropped it in the nearby trash can because I did not want to be wearing something I valued while standing in the middle of what was happening. And then I faced Leo's mother and told her that her son had assaulted my daughter, and she had assaulted me, and I wanted to know if she was not afraid of the law. She laughed. She held up her designer handbag and told me it was a gift from her husband and the silk scarf on the handle was worth more than my daughter's life and mine combined. I looked at the bag. It was priceless. It was also familiar in a way I couldn't immediately place. The particular tooling on the leather, the custom hardware, something I had seen before in a context I was now trying to locate. I told her very calmly that I hadn't known Liam Gomez was married or had a child, and I would like to meet her husband. She said her husband's marriage was not something a bottom feeder needed to be informed about. I told her my name was Amelia Gomez and I was Liam Gomez's sister. The crowd erupted in laughter. Leo's mother looked at my car and told me that anyone driving that piece of junk and claiming to be a Gomez was delusional from poverty. She said she was Miles Gomez's sister-in-law, and she would certainly recognize his own sister. The other parents looked at my car and their mockery became louder. I let them laugh because the alternative was telling them things I preferred to demonstrate rather than announce. What happened next was the kind of thing that happens when people who have decided they are untouchable are given an audience that agrees with them. Leo's mother picked up a brick from the side of the road and began methodically destroying my car. Windows, headlights, hood, not 1 inch spared. The other parents joined in with whatever they could find, caught up in the mob logic of a group that has been given permission to do damage. They pried open the trunk and found the items I had collected at an auction the previous week and hadn't yet moved to storage: scroll paintings, ceramic pieces, antiques that any informed person would have recognized immediately as priceless. Leo's mother pulled out a scroll painting, called it trash, and tore it to shreds. The others followed her lead. I watched them destroy 6 figures of irreplaceable cultural artifacts and thought about patience, which was something I had developed over 10 years of building a company in my brother's memory, and which had never been more useful than it was in this specific moment. I told them calmly that I hoped they would be as enthusiastic when it was time to pay for what they were destroying. She laughed in my face. She said no court in the city would dare make her pay with the Gomez family's connections. I took out my phone. Before the call connected, a parent snatched it and smashed it on the ground. They told me there was no point calling for backup, that I was probably summoning beggars to play along with my act. I put my phone in my pocket. The smashed one would do for now. The call had connected for 3 seconds before it was taken, which was enough, and walked toward the school entrance to get my daughter. The director came out to block me. He told me a lowlife like me was not welcome. I told him I wanted my daughter. He said she had been expelled and a teacher would bring her out. The door opened and my daughter was thrown out, her backpack flying after her, landing hard on the pavement and crying. I crossed the distance in 3 steps and picked her up and held her and felt the specific quality of rage that has no volume, because it has gone somewhere past the register where sound is possible. I turned to the director. He looked at me with the face of a man who had decided he was entirely safe. He said she was trash-born from a poor woman, and they were just throwing out the garbage. I looked at him and said nothing and held my daughter and waited. The cars arrived 4 minutes later. Not my legal team, them too. But first the 3 vehicles that had been en route since my 3-second call. The ones that pulled up in a formation that silenced the crowd before anyone got out. My head of security stepped out first, then 2 members of my executive team, then the woman I had called specifically for this situation. Clara Hines, my chief legal officer, who had been handling Gomez Group matters for 7 years, and who had a particular gift for walking into a disaster and immediately identifying every actionable element in it with the detached precision of someone who genuinely enjoyed her work. Clara looked at the destroyed car, the shredded antiques, the bruise on my daughter's knee, the mark on my face from Leo's mother's hand, and the brick still sitting on the ground near the wreckage, and she opened her notepad. The parents who had been jeering 30 seconds ago had stopped entirely. The recalibration was happening in real time and it was not subtle. People were physically stepping backward, creating distance from Leo's mother, from the teacher, from the director, from the wreckage they had participated in with such enthusiasm 5 minutes ago. Leo's mother was still holding her designer handbag. I looked at it again and finally placed where I had seen the tooling before. It was from the Gomez Group's private collection, a piece that had been commissioned for my brother personally 12 years ago and that I had assumed was lost when he died. There were 3 of those bags in existence. I owned one. My brother had owned one. The third had been a gift, made for someone specific, someone Liam had told me about in the last year of his life with the careful quietness of a man protecting something he wasn't sure how to explain yet. I asked Leo's mother where her husband was. She said he was traveling. I asked for his name, his full name, not the Gomez name, his own name. She said Marcus. I asked her to show me a photograph. The defiance in her face was already showing its first fracture. The specific expression of someone who has been performing certainty and has just encountered a question they can't dismiss. She pulled out her phone with hands that were not entirely steady and showed me a photo. The man in the photo was not dead. He was not impersonating anyone. He was someone I had met once, briefly. A man my brother had introduced to me 18 months before he died as someone he trusted, someone he was considering bringing into the company, and who had disappeared after Liam's death without explanation and whom I had not thought about since because grief had reorganized my priorities completely and permanently. Marcus, who had apparently taken my brother's surname, who had a 5-year-old son, which put the timing of his relationship with Liam at exactly the period my brother had been quietly, carefully, in the last year of his life, telling me there was someone he needed me to meet when the time was right. I sat with this for exactly the amount of time I could afford, which was about 4 seconds. And then I asked Clara to add the handbag to her documentation list as potentially Gomez Group property requiring provenance verification. I asked her to proceed with the full asset damage assessment, the assault documentation, the school's liability exposure for expelling an assault victim and physically ejecting a 5-year-old from the premises, and whatever additional charges applied to a group of parents who had destroyed priceless cultural artifacts on a public street while being recorded on 3 separate cameras my team had been running since they arrived. The director, who had called my daughter garbage 12 minutes ago, was now attempting a smile in my direction that his face had no practice making. The teacher had her phone out, possibly to delete her own messages from the parents' group, which Clara would obtain through discovery regardless. Leo's mother was very quiet. I looked at her and I thought about my brother. His humility, his decency, the careful way he had protected the things that mattered to him. Whatever the full story of Marcus was, and I intended to learn it completely, through the appropriate channels, with the appropriate documentation, this woman had taken a name. She had been given access to through grief and love and had used it to have a child assaulted and a teacher corrupted and a school director turned into an instrument of cruelty. That was not Liam's doing. That was entirely her own. I told her that the Gomez name had been built on 30 years of work by people who treated others with basic dignity regardless of their status, and that she had spent the morning demonstrating she understood none of that, and that the next time she used my family's name to harm a child, she should be aware that the family's actual representative would be considerably less patient than she had found me today. Then I picked up my daughter, whose face was pressed into my neck, and carried her to the car that my team had arrived in, and did not look back at the gate or the teacher or the director, or the wreck of my unremarkable vehicle surrounded by the evidence of what people do when they believe they are safe from consequences. The full accounting took 3 weeks. The school lost its operating license. The director and teacher faced professional sanctions. The parents who had participated in destroying the antiques were named individually in the civil suit, which settled for an amount that Clara described as appropriate and which I described as the beginning of an education. Leo's mother retained her own counsel, who contacted Clara within 48 hours to open settlement discussions, which told me everything about how untouchable the Gomez family connections had actually made her when those connections were examined by people who knew what they were looking at. Marcus contacted me himself by letter, handwritten, which told me he was either genuinely from another era or had been advised that anything electronic would be discoverable. The letter was 3 pages. I read it twice. The full story of who he was to my brother was in it, carefully written, and it was the kind of story that required more time than 3 weeks to process, but which contained, underneath everything, the shape of my brother as I had actually known him, private and careful and protective of the things he loved. I put the letter in the folder with the rest of the documentation and called Clara and told her to proceed carefully with the provenance investigation on the handbag, with full discretion, and to keep me informed. Then I went to pick up my daughter from my sister's house where she had been staying during the proceedings, and took her for ice cream, and let her tell me about the dance she had been practicing, and listened to all of it, and thought about nothing else for the rest of the afternoon.